It's Sylvain here. Welcome to another video. So hopefully you like this one. So today we have an interview with Ricardo Schiller from BlockBase. So project BlockBase, they're based in Portugal. So first and foremost, welcome Ricardo. And can you talk a bit about yourself?
Thanks, Sylvain. Thanks for having me. So yeah, I'm Ricardo. I have about 15 years experience in software engineering. I've got a master's degree in computer science, and I've done many different projects. And about 5 years ago, I stumbled into Bitcoin and found it really interesting. So I did the same stuff almost everybody does. So I started learning about Bitcoin mostly through Andreas Antonopoulos, and this video is very, very interesting. And I got more and more interested about the subject. And then in 2016, 17, the craziness about smart contracts was exploding. So everyone was talking about smart contracts, but they didn't quite understand how those could be used practically. So it was difficult to find use for those. And at that time, I started looking at blockchain very seriously at the company I'm working at currently as head of R&D. So I started looking at blockchain in the sense that it could also be a good platform instead of running code like smart contracts does, but for storing general data. Because also at the time, at 2016, 17, blockchains were being used to store specific data. So there was a blockchain to store identity, a blockchain to store serial plates, license plates, a blockchain to store domain names and so forth. And that didn't make a lot of sense to me. It made sense to have like a general purpose blockchain to store any type of data. And that's when the concept of BlockBase started popping into my mind. So that's the basic story of figuring out the concept of BlockBase.
Cool. Yeah. So kind of first question, so people get familiar with what BlockBase is. So what is it? And then as we often speak, so what kind of problem does it solve for either users or companies?
Yeah, sure. BlockBase is a platform to store any type of data there. It's like a database storage platform, so you can store as many databases there as you want.
Okay.
But on blockchain. That's the main concept of that. So that's different from having a smart contracts platform. It's different from having like a value transfer platform like Bitcoin and Monero and whatever, right? Because it's mostly to store data. So you're going to use BlockBase to store data there. And so the question then is, why would you want to do that? What's the motivation for that, and what's the value of that, and why would people use it, and why is it needed? So the thing is, if you store data on a traditional database, that data is unsecure. It's not secure in any way or fashion. So if it's your personal database with your personal project, there's no big motivation in storing it in a blockchain. But if it's a company database or a database from the government or a public-private partnership between a company and the government that stores important data, then it gets more and more important to make sure that data is safe. And the thing is, traditional databases are not safe, period. The reason for that is that the technology itself is not safe. And if you look at all the science papers related to that and all the stuff that goes around that topic, it's just layers and layers and layers of security, like in an onion, where you have to add layers and layers and layers and layers of security because it's not secure. So you have to have network security and data security and structure security and people security and people to secure the people that are securing the data and people to monitor the people that are securing the people that are securing the data and so forth. It goes crazy and it's not secure. So the end result of all of that is that the information isn't secure. So we've got like trillions of dollars in cost from data that is stolen, lost, manipulated and so forth every year. It's a huge problem. And the idea of BlockBase is to tackle that specific problem.
Yeah, interesting. Exactly. How many times have we heard, especially sometimes coming from banks and so on, they lose or they lost data, so they send letters out to people, and yeah, your identity was stolen, and then we heard from that specific company. I'm not going to name it. That someone that acquired it then sold it again to other people because it was good data, credit scores that other lenders could use for their own profits essentially. So really nice project, looks really solid, and in that matter, it was founded by the European Union. So I didn't read too much in that sense. Can you elaborate on the funding that happened with the EU?
Yeah, sure. So when we started looking into the concept of block-based in depth, um, the idea wasn't defined right from the start. So we had to figure out what was the shape and function of block-based as we went along. And about in 2018, 2017, I don't know the exact dates right now, we applied for funding in a program that's called Portugal 2020 funding. That comes directly from the European Union. So there's a European program called Horizon 2020, where Portugal 2020 is under the umbrella of that. And it's funding for R&D projects, cutting edge R&D projects in Europe. And to apply for that funding, you have to write a big, ugly document. It was about 100 pages long, where you have to specify everything in detail about what your project is going to do. So
Wow.
there was a big research on what block-based should be, and we dove into the details of current computer security and how that works. And there are three main pillars to computer security that we can go in depth in this conversation if we have time. And it kind of explains really well what block-based is. And those are confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So at the heart of computer security, we've got that. And we started from there, and then we studied a lot about security and how it worked. And we tried to map that into the concept of block-based and of blockchain. And just as just to provide more information there, for example, integrity is something that only blockchain can solve. So you didn't have real integrity of data before blockchain. But anyway, so we applied for the funding, and with this document, it takes about 6 months, and it's evaluated by a panel of experts, and it's really hard to get funding. Like 5% of projects gets funding, and we won the funding, and that gave us like good confidence, a good idea that we were on the right track. This was a good idea to continue to pursue. And yeah, and then it was history. So we developed BlockBase. We are currently at the finishing what we started to develop. So BlockBase is really starting to get mature now. And we've got currently a network of 20 nodes running it. So it's working.
Yeah, good. So do you have a lot of companies using that service now that you know of, or you don't need to name any companies, but do you have a certain number of companies using that at the moment?
Yeah, so we are in the adoption phase. There are companies that are interested in using it. We are also using it. There are dApps in the ecosystem that are interested in using it too. But it's hard to get adoption in the blockchain space. It's not something like you put it out and the next day you've got hundreds of companies using it. So it's hard to do that.
Buy it and they'll use it kind of statement, but it doesn't
So
happen as
when people ask that, like there's a lot of expectations in this space, but when people ask about that, I usually ask them, so what happened to that consortium of companies that grouped with Ethereum in 2017 to build the future of the blockchain? You had huge companies joining that consortium, and nothing came out of that. So It
Is
takes
that the
time. We're still
Ethereum
very,
Alliance or
very,
something like that?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Ethereum Blockchain Alliance or something like that.
Yeah.
Enterprise Alliance.
Yeah.
So not much went from there. Also, the technology, from my point of view, is flawed. That's why it didn't pick up. But that's another topic for discussion. But yeah, so it's adoption is not as easy as people think.
No.
But yeah, from my point of view, it will definitely come.
Yeah, perfect. Um, Oh yeah, one. I was just looking at my notes here. So one question I had to ask. I got in touch with Sergio, and then he was talking to me about BlockBase and so on. So I went on the website and clicked on the network tab. So I saw the BBT token and also Sandbox, which appeared to be something that someone can try to load to kind of use that database, kind of in a trial mode. Can you explain how that works a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So the sandbox there is to give the someone that's interested in using the technology an experience of using it right out of the box. So what the sandbox does, it communicates with the current network that we're running and issuing a database for themselves and then adding data and so forth. And they can look at the data that they've added, details about the data, for example, how encrypted it gets. I haven't talked about the encryption, so I'm getting ahead of myself, but yeah, on the sandbox, basically you can experience all the functionalities or the main functionalities you would have when you have the service of BlockBase set up for you. So just to add more information there, and this gets a little more complicated, but I'm going to try and do it anyway. So BlockBase, instead of being one blockchain, it's multiple side chains to currently the EOS platform. So you don't have one blockchain, you have many blockchains.
Okay.
But how many blockchains you have? You have as many as you want to request. So there are two types of entities in the blockchain ecosystem. It's the requesters of blockchains and the providers of blockchains. So let's say you want to use the service, the storage service, the secure storage service of BlockBase as a requester. So what would happen is you would go to GitHub, you would download the code, you will run the node, and then you will issue a sidechain for you. And the providers of the network would pick up your request and would build a sidechain specifically for you. And then you could store data there. You could store your databases there and so forth. And it would be encrypted by the network. And you've got a lot of different parameters you can configure there. So you can configure the block times, you can configure the block sizes, you can configure the amount of nodes that will participate on your network. You can configure private seats on the network. So let's say you want to have some of your nodes also running on the network. So you can configure all of that. And once that is configured and issued on the network, then the providers will decide if they want to provide your sidechain or not, because it depends on how much BBT you're going to pay them, because you pay per block. You pay them. It's like a service. It's like a cloud service where you pay for a database that you want to use. Here it's the same concept. So basically you pay per block that it's produced. And if you're asking for fast blocks, many providers, and you are going to pay very little, the providers won't produce a sidechain for you. So it's a market-based situation. And yeah, so that's the basic concept. And when you have this sidechain going, then you can store data there. And basically what gets stored is basically all the operations of a traditional database that you do to a traditional database. So we're talking about create database, create tables, create columns, like structuring the whole database, and then all the inserts and updates and deletes of data to manage the database. And that gets stored on this sidechain for you. And what happens is you've got a log of all operations there. And since you've got a log on blockchain, you've got proof of everything that happened on that database. So I could, if I had my sidechain, I wanted to prove you the current state of the database, I would give you my sidechain and you would run all the operations on your local database, and you will end up with the current state of database that is stored on the sidechain. So that's part of what BlockBase is. It's has some more complex concepts there.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So we talked about EOS. Can it be, other chains or other blockchains that have started to kind of integrate side chains and so on? Again, can it be built on other blockchain as well as, just not on EOS only, or is it something? Just to clarify that point.
That's an awesome question. So the BlockBase was designed to have a main chain that it has to, with smart contracts, that it has to communicate with. So we need a main chain, and that main chain has to have smart contracts. And then, well, if you did it on Ethereum, it would be very slow and very, very costly, right? Yeah. Very, very costly. So on EOS, you've got like it's 1,000 to cost, so it's really, really cheap compared to EOS, to Ethereum. So we could, in theory, have any type of main chain. We would just need to have the smart contracts built on for that chain specifically, and then we would have to do the communication plumbing on our side, on BlockBase side, to communicate correctly with those smart contracts on different blockchains. Besides from that, yeah, it could live on different blockchains, the concept. So you can think of BlockBase as an expansion to a traditional blockchain for storage of data. Because if you want to store, let's look at any blockchain currently. If you want to store many databases there, but when I'm talking about many databases, like thousands, tens of thousands of databases there, you've got a big problem, because a blockchain wasn't designed for that specifically. So a blockchain, it has a hard limit of data that you can put there, right? And the more you want to put, like a blockchain scales to it has a scaling cap. You can make it as fast as you want, but it has a scaling cap. So now the concept of sidechains is getting more and more popular. For example, with Polkadot and Cosmos, DB, and stuff like that. So the concept here of sidechains and parallel stuff working together is getting more and more popular. We started that concept in 2018, have sidechains, because it makes sense right from the start to have that. If you want to store databases on blockchain, it cannot be on the main chain. It just can't. It's too much data.
Too much data, yeah. Doing some research, and then then you mentioned about Bitcoin. I obviously started with Bitcoin early on, and I started back in 2018 learning about that stuff. So it's not like I'm not that fairly fresh into the blockchain space, but with Bitcoin. And then we ended up getting some forks of Bitcoin, and then one in particular, BSV. And then by reading a bit of what they're doing, they seem to be kind of heading that way of having data on the blockchain. So I don't know if you've read a bit or if you know a bit about that, and then how would it actually compare to like what they're trying to accomplish versus what BlockBase could provide as kind of a supplement to an actual blockchain.
Yeah, so the main argument of having small blocks, that's the reason of the forks. It's Bitcoin Cash wanted to have more blocks, and then they got mad between each other, and then they forked to BSV, and Bitcoin Cash maintained. The main concept is behind that is to have bigger blocks, to store more data there.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is, if you do that, it tends to have a more centralized system, because you have to process all those blocks, all that information, to maintain up to date with the network, and to make sure that the information that you have about the current state of the data is correct. So you have much more processing to do. So basically, the more you scale the block size, the less decentralized the network tends to be. So you have to work with that. And that was one main argument for Bitcoin, not to scale the blocks. Now, I'm not the expert to say what is the perfect block size. I understand that Bitcoin Cash went with that vision, and BSV also. I'm definitely not a fan of those projects, so I don't like them. I don't especially. I understand that there's a lot of innovation there, but I understand also that there's a lot of greed there, and the prospect of forking a chain and like getting an instant billion value chain gone from there is very, very how do you say, very temptuous, if that's the correct word for people. So I don't know to which extent the only reason to do that is because bigger blocks are the right way to go. So so yeah, so it's a hard question you're asking, because I don't know. I've never been asked that question. I don't know exactly how it maps to BlockBase. It's but yeah, I don't know if my answer was
No, that's
what you were
okay.
looking
Yeah,
for.
just yeah, we didn't talk about this one, but I was like, I just remembered, because I was reading about BSV, and then I know how much they like the claim with the bigger blocks, having all the transactions per second and so on. Like they do that claim often, and then they kind of go. Like it seems like they want to go more that route, the data, than the actual like the peer-to-peer transactions at some point. Maybe not. I'm sure they would be, they'll comment below if they see that video. But no, I think
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
good. It's good answer. I think obviously it's kind of different than having it on the main chain versus kind of a side chain. So obviously it involves different. And if there's a main issue with the main chain, would that be an issue with all the companies being on top, built, and sharing their data? Maybe that's something to look at. I'm not sure, but
Yeah, so definitely there's blockchains are hard. It's a hard thing to do, and the decentralization aspect is very important in building a blockchain. And looking at EOS specifically, so EOS, the EOS.io network, but EOS specifically, it decided it should have 21 block producers. So that's the way it works. And then it has the whole DPoS system behind it, where you can vote on the block producers. So it's a different approach, where you can say it that it's more centralized, but then people can argue that no, it's more decentralized because anyone has the power to vote and can change the current block producers. That's a correct argument too. So there's many different ways to look at the centralization and decentralization of blockchains. And it's like a topic by itself that you need to prepare and study a lot, so you can talk about that specifically. But usually it's like the main concept I wanted to add, and that maps to BlockBase, is if you make one central blockchain more to accept more data because the blocks are bigger, that leads to centralization. And again, that has a hard cap. Right? It has a hard cap. You can have blocks of, I don't know, let's go crazy. I don't know what the current size of the blocks are from BSV. I don't really care, but let's say it's a gigabyte, right, of block sizes every 10 minutes. So to have that type of data, to provide that type of data, you need big machines. And even so, it's not enough for stored databases of the world there. It's not enough in any sense. So it's a hard cap there. So the only way to do that, from my perspective, is to have side chains that are pegged to a main chain. That's the concept of block. So every time you produce a block in a block-based sidechain, the block header gets published on the main chain. So you're attaching the block header to the main chain. It gets registered on the main chain. And the cool thing of that is the main chain, since you're publishing the block header on the main chain, it gives you proof of the structure of the sidechain. So you get part of the benefits of proof of structure of the sidechain, and you're not publishing the whole data there. You're just publishing the block header. So you can have large blocks, but those are kept outside of the main chain. But you still have the security, because if someone wants to know the exact structure, they've got the proof on the main chain. They can check the block headers on the side chain, and then they can check the block contents. And that's the basic concept. So you can scale a lot from there.
Yeah.
So that's basically it.
For sure, yeah. So when we talk about companies and onboarding and whatnot, usually it's good to have like partners, obviously, going forward. So what can you tell us about some of the partners that are with BlockBase at the moment?
So we've got some partnerships that we can't announce right now, related to companies here in Portugal, where we are. We've recently established a company with a partnership with Higher Vibes. Higher Vibes, it's a EOS project related to, so it's like a distributed version of, a decentralized version of LinkedIn. And they had a problem that many projects that use blockchain have. It's the problem of how are we going to store like big amounts of data when this scales, right? When people start using our system, how are we going to store this data? Because if you want to store that on the main blockchain, that is going to get really costly for you, right? And even talking about EOS, so Ethereum is completely out of question. Ethereum is crazy. You cannot store, like, forget it.
Let
Warren
alone
Buffett couldn't use it.
just do a single transaction. It's going to cost you quite a bit.
Yeah. So if you wanted to put your personal database on Ethereum, Warren Buffett wouldn't be able to do that. He would spend all his money there. Mm-hmm. But on EOS, yeah, you can do it. You can store a little bit of megabytes there. It gets more and more costly as you go along. So if you want to store like a gigabyte, it gets really, really costly, and a terabyte is like a fortune. So basically, when you're thinking about a system that has information, that you need to have proof of the information, and you want to store it on a main chain, you've got that scalability cap. Unless you provide huge amounts of money, you cannot store it on the main chain. So what's your alternatives? Perhaps it's traditional databases. Perhaps it's having like hashes of the data that's on those traditional databases on the blockchain. But hashes, well, it's like it's not a perfect solution. So we came with the solution of BlockBase, which is like how do you say, it's an optimal approach to that, because you don't need to store everything on the main chain. You store on your side chain that is configured for your needs. So perhaps you don't need like 21 block producers to secure your chain. Perhaps you only need 5 or 10, or perhaps you are super worried about security and 21 is not enough. You need 30 or 40. And perhaps you need fast block times. Perhaps you need slow block times. Perhaps you need bigger blocks or smaller blocks. So you can configure all of that on your sidechain. And I think that's the future. So like relying on not centralized, on centrally configured, it's not centrally configured, it's the wrong words, but on
kind of
blockchains that have a specific, that have a single way of working, a single throughput, and have to a single amount of security, and you have to rely on those aspects to store your data. That's very inflexible. That's very not flexible. So having the power to produce the sidechain that's designed for your needs makes a lot of sense for us.
Yeah, exactly. Like side chains, interoperability with other projects, allowing like a bridge with Ethereum. I guess we see that in case of EOS and TELOS as well. They have the EVM, so there's kind of integration starting to happen there. So I think that's kind of the future as we go ahead with, move along with all the improvements, more data, maybe more companies onboarding all those different projects. Obviously, that's I think that's something that's coming up really, really soon too. Another question. Talking vision for BlockBase, for the project BlockBase, kind of in the short, medium, and long term. Can you just explain a bit what's ahead with the project? Again, short, medium, and longer term.
Yeah. So I think BlockBase has a big potential. So it's like currently the experience of using BlockBase is very, very similar to using a cloud service. So, but instead of going to a pretty user interface, you have to download the node code and run it on your machine. But besides from that, it's very, very similar to using a cloud service. So the way I envision BlockBase's future, and I think that makes total sense in the future, is for data storage. So if you look at a company, and the company looks at blockchain and tries to figure out how it's going to use blockchain. So unless it's like a payments company, perhaps they can do some things with smart contracts, but not that much, right? Because smart contracts are blind. Now we have this oracles technology, which gives you like an insight of small things, but besides of that, smart contracts can only look at the blockchain itself, not outside data. So they are still very blind. So the main purpose you're going to look blockchain for, at least from my opinion, is for storage of data, because it makes sense to store data there. It gets secured. It stays there forever. You've got proof of data. So you want to make sure that the data you have isn't compromised, isn't changed without you knowing, isn't lost, and so forth. So from my point of view, the concept of BlockBase is something that will make total sense in the future, total sense. And from the legal standpoint, so how does adoption come, right? Usually companies, like, why would a company use like a blockchain if it can use a traditional database? Usually this comes from the government side, where it starts to set regulations. And this is happening in Portugal already. And some governments have gone full blown in blockchain, like Estonia, which the whole government is on blockchain currently. They started 10 years ago.
Oh, is it? Wow.
But yeah. And here in Portugal, everything that's like medical related is starting to move to blockchain. So, and this comes from the government. The government is saying, okay, we have all these companies that deal with medical stuff, and they all have like their data on their local database and so forth. But this information is very, very important, because you know what, people die, and you have to know what the causes of that. And that has to be like recorded in a way that we can have proof of what happens. So it's coming from the government to start to use blockchain. And what is the use there, right? The use is to store data there. It makes sense to start to record. It's like a log of what happened, of the operations that were performed, but are done on blockchain. So you've got proof of what happened. Because if it's in a local database, in a local log, no one can stop the database administrator from tampering that data, from deleting that data, from changing that data. And this applies to medical, it applies to accounting, it applies to finance, it applies to governments and citizen data and so forth and so on. It applies to so many aspects where people benefit a lot or escape from possible situation by deleting data and so forth. All this benefits a lot from having blockchain. So it's very important from my point of view to doing that. And from my point of view, that will be the future. So currently a company doesn't care about that, but when it gets popular and the company says, we store our data on blockchain, our operations get stored on blockchain, you've got proof, you can check it here. The other company, that's the competition, will need to do that, right? So it's like how do you say? It's like the ball, the snowball. It snowballs right
Snowball
from
effect,
there, right? Yeah.
Everyone gets on board, and even if in that case, if it's more secured and also they save costs, obviously that could be a driven factor to using it. Yeah, definitely. One last thing before we wrap this up, if anyone watching the interview at the moment, where can they go to get information on BlockBase?
Yeah, so it's the site is blockbase.network. From there, you can find us on Telegram, on Twitter, on Reddit, on LinkedIn too. So just go there and start talking to us if you're interested. You've got a lot of information there on the site too about how the system works, about how to download the code to run it for yourself. So if you want to run a sidechain for yourself right now, you can do that. If you want to issue a sidechain for you right now, you can do it. There's a network of 20 providers right now providing the sidechains. So the system is up and running, and we are working on it every day to make it more and more fast and more performance. So definitely, if you're interested, contact us and we'll chat about it.
Perfect, thanks. And then I'll be putting the links again. Look in the description. I'll just put some of the links in there that you can have access to their Telegram and also the website as well. So thanks a lot for coming on the show, Ricardo. It was great to learn more about BlockBase, and obviously I'll be keeping in touch on Telegram and so on, and then see where that goes from here. So thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Thank you, Sylvain, for having me.
Thanks.